All right, welcome Daniel Nation to our monthly podcast. It's great to see everybody back on tonight. And tonight we have a special guest for you that you are going to so enjoy. Kevin Freeman is someone that I've heard speak before, both in Frisco. The first time I heard him was at the Frisco Conservative Lakes Coalition, and then I heard him speak in San Antonio last year at the Republican Party of Texas State Convention. And Kevin is a best-selling author and the host of Economic War Room on Blaze TV. He's considered one of the world's leading experts on the issues of economic warfare and financial terrorism, and has consulted for and briefed members of both the U.S. House and the Senate, present and past CIA, DIA, FBI, SEC, Homeland Security, the Justice Department, as well as local and state law enforcement. But the most recent thing I want to talk about is his book, which is Pirate Money: Discovering the Founders' Hidden Plan for Economic Justice and Defeating the Great Reset. And I've had a chance to dive into this book since the state convention, where I received a copy of it. And it's really an intriguing read of how we got to where we are today with the economic collapse and the financial problems that we are facing. And so Kevin's going to come on tonight and talk about legalizing transactional gold in the state of Texas. But before we get into that discussion, Kevin, welcome onto the show. And can you just kind of give us a backdrop of what got you down the path of believing in transactional gold as a solution to the problem?
Hey, thank you, Brandon. It's good to be with Daniel Nation. My beginning on this came starting in 1971, when I was a 10-year-old kid and we abandoned the gold standard under Nixon. I was like, that's wrong. What they'll do is they'll print too much money. Yes, I was that nerdy as a 10-year-old. I was buying Spider-Man comics for 15 cents and Slurpees for a dime. And yes, today, that same Spider-Man comic would be like $5, which shows what inflation is. In fact, you could get a cheeseburger, fries, and a shake at McDonald's for under $1. It exactly is what I thought. You know, simple economics, Milton Friedman teaches that inflation is always a monetary phenomenon, and inflation is literally too much money chasing too few goods and services. That's what creates inflation. And so as a child, I wanted to be on the gold standard. It was so much so that my parents went to Switzerland on a vacation, just the two of them. And they said, what do you want us to bring? Chocolates? And I said, no, I want gold. Bring me some gold. And they brought me some Swiss gold home, which I still have today. Bottom line is, I've studied economic warfare, economics, investing since I was a kid. I was the economic warfare consultant to the Pentagon on a contract basis. And in 2008, I was in warning the Department of Defense that other nations planned to destroy our currency, to remove it as the world's reserve currency. And they were called the BRICS nations. At that time, it was BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And I told them, based on my travel to Moscow in 2006 and my global travels as an international money manager, I'm telling you, other nations of the world want to end the dollar's exorbitant privilege, reserve currency status, and they want to attack us. Well, at the time, we had $10 trillion in debt. And I warned, if we do this and go down this road, we'll end up with $30 or $40 trillion in debt, and they'll be able to destroy our currency. And lo and behold, we have $36.3 trillion as I'm speaking right now. So that's what got me into this, is the recognition that money, and Jesus said it in Luke 16:11, if you're not faithful with your unrighteous mammon, you will not be trusted with true riches. I want liberty, security, and values for myself, my family, my kids, my grandkids, and the future generations. How do we get that? We have to have righteous money, and we've got to treat it honorably, and we've got to handle it properly.
Absolutely. That's a great explanation. And that's a great segue into transactional gold. And can you explain what the concept of transactional gold is?
Yeah. So the notion is, the founders put Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution. It says no state shall make anything but gold and silver coins legal tender. Just imagine going to your local coffee shop, Black Rock, Black Rifle Coffee, or Dutch Bros, or for those of you who use Starbucks, maybe Starbucks, and you walk in with your little gold coin and you try and shave off a couple of flecks and you buy your cup of coffee. Now, at Starbucks, you'll have to shave off more than a couple because Starbucks is expensive. But the point is that if you use gold and silver coins like the founders wrote in the Constitution, it's not really transactional. There's no real way to get change when you go to buy something. Now, it's true. In 1925, 100 years ago, if you bought a good man's suit, a $20 gold coin would buy you a good man's suit. Today, a $20 gold coin is worth $2,650 to buy you a nice man's suit. Or even as any time from 1920 to the present, since the dawn of the automobile as a popular item for American homes, a gallon of gas has cost between 10 and 25 cents. And you'll look at me and say, Kevin, it costs a little more than 25 cents. Not if you use real silver quarters and real silver dimes. The entire history of gasoline prices in America can be summed up between 10 and 25 cents a gallon if you count the silver content of the dime and quarter pre-1964. So we know precious metals hold their value, but we also know they're not very transactional. There's no way to really pay for stuff. We barely pay for stuff with U.S. dollars, actual real paper dollars today. It's almost a cashless society. So how do we make gold and silver transactional? Well, the same way you make paper dollars transactional. You give them electronic transfer capabilities. You give the ability for me, Brandon, to pay you. Let's say that I'm going to ride on your bus, and it's going to cost, how much does it cost to take a bus ride to Austin to go stand up for your First Amendment rights and exercise your political privileges? How much does it cost to do it? Let's say it costs $50.
Yep, 55.
$55. So I can write you a check. I can hand you two 20s, a 10, and a 5. I could hand you three 20s and expect change back. Or I could hand you a debit card, or I could tap to pay, or whatever. That's transactional money. I can't walk up with a gold coin and shove it in your face. You might say, I can take it, but I can't give you change. You know, you might, yes, but I don't think you could give change in like currency.
No.
So the point is, how do we make gold and silver transactional? The same way you make U.S. dollars transactional. You make them where there's electronic transfer capability so that you can do online bill pay, so that you can pay your rent, so you can pay your employees, so you can pay your taxes, so you could buy your cup of coffee or a new suit or pay for your gasoline or whatever. And one way to do that is to slap a debit card onto your existing gold and silver reserves. Now, how do we know that you actually have the gold and silver there? Good news. We have something in Texas called a bullion depository in Leander. It's already established, was established by Giovanni Capriglione and Tam Parker and a few others, set this up a few years back. And I could go in and I could put on deposit there gold or silver, and they could give me an electronic transfer card where they would keep track of it, and they would say, hey, the equivalent of $55 worth, which would be what? That would be 1/50th of an ounce of gold approximately, will come out of Kevin Freeman's account and go into your business's account that's rented the buses. And I could pay you $55 exactly. It would be in your account, and I made gold and silver transactional. And all it takes is a very simple piece of legislation in Austin, and there are like 30 states looking at doing this since I wrote the book Pirate Money.
Yeah, so when I was at your event there in San Antonio, when you spoke, you talked about the Glint debit card, which I went out and got one because you were talking about it. So I now have one. I have gold-backed currency, and I've used this before. I've used it just to play around with it to see if it works, and it does. So what's the difference between having this Glint Pay card in my wallet and then getting something passed in Texas, and why do we need something in Texas when we have this?
Okay, so I'll give you the three T's. There are three reasons, each starts with letter T, that explain it. And I love Glint, and I love Jason Cousins, the founder of Glint. I don't own any part of Glint at this point, although someday I may want to buy into it. It is a great concept. I have money on deposit there, but there are three T's. One is trust. My gold, supposedly, and I believe it is held in Switzerland. And so if I want to go see, feel, taste, touch that gold, I've got to fly to Switzerland to do it. And I'm a little concerned because the Swiss banking authorities, or there might be some limitation on my travel or a pandemic or whatever. I don't like that. I want my gold in Texas. I trust it more if it's in Texas. And I think a state can bring that level of trust. The second, and by the way, that's the number one reason people don't own gold now, is they don't know how to buy it, where to buy it, what to do with it when they buy it. They don't know who to trust. That's why Costco sells out, because people say, well, I trust Costco. And so they'll go to Costco and they'll buy these little 1 ounce bars of gold for $2,700 or $2,800, whatever the price of gold is at the time, marked up a tiny amount. And they say, well, I trust Costco. But how do you spend those? You can't. And that's why it's got to be transactional. But the first T in the reasons why not just use Glint, the private sector alternative, is trust. Second one is taxes. Every time you use that Glint card, Brandon, the IRS wants to know, what did you pay for the gold that you put in there? And when you spend it, what did you spend it at? Because we want to collect a tax on that, which is immoral, I think, because gold protects you against inflation. Why should you be taxed for inflation? But nevertheless, the IRS requires that you report, and with Glint, you can have that calculation done for you by a major accounting firm. It costs $35. They'll send it to you at the end of the year, and you go file it. But then you have to pay 28% or something like that of any gain gold has had. And gold, when I started buying it at Glint, it was like $2,000 an ounce. It's $2,700 an ounce. So I've got a pretty healthy gain there. Every time I spend that, I owe the government a piece of that. Well, I don't like that. I don't think that's fair. Taxes. If a state issued gold and silver currency, Article 1, Section 10, I don't think they would have the right to tax it. It might be tested in the courts, but taxes are a big reason. And the third reason is taking. What if the British government decides that you, Brandon, spoke out too loudly on an issue in Texas? You showed up in Austin and you said that, you thought taxes were wrong, or that marriage is between a man and a woman, or that boys don't become girls, or something like that, because that's what you believe. You say that, and the British government says you're inciting problems, and therefore we're just going to take your money. We're just going to take it and own it. That's not yours anymore. You say, well, America would never do that, except in 1933. When they did, Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed an executive order that confiscated all privately held gold. And they took it away from people and paid them $20 an ounce for it. And then a year or so later, they marked it up to $35 an ounce. Well, that sounds like theft to me, but it was the government. So when the government takes it, they don't call it theft, but it sounds like theft to me. And I don't want a taking. If the state of Texas is there and Ken Paxton is there and he's willing to stand up for my gold and silver transactional capability because it was passed duly by the Texas Legislature and signed into law by Governor Abbott. So Ken Paxton says, I'm going to stop that. I know he's got some authority. He helped me with a problem I had with one of the credit card companies where my daughter used my credit card and they added $10,000 to the bill. They wouldn't correct it. They were researching it. It went on for months until I saw Ken Paxton at CPAC. He said, hey, Kevin, how you doing? I said, well, Mr. Attorney General, I'm doing really well, except for what? I said, well, this credit card company's kind of jacking me around a bit. He said, give me your card. 2 days later, I was getting apologies, and that was solved. Why? Wow. I said, how do you do that, Mr. Attorney General? I said, the great state of Texas doesn't want Texans treated poorly, so I told your credit card company that if that's how they treat Texans, we would have to investigate whether or not they should be doing business in our state. Is that fraud? What are you doing? And they backed down instantly. So I want to prevent taking of my gold, so I love what Glint is doing. I just feel like at the state level, it is an enumerated authority under the Constitution. It is one of the legitimate roles government can take, is actually guaranteeing that money is real.
Yeah.
That's a legitimate thing.
That's a great argument for bringing gold and silver currency transactions into Texas. Now, I got a question about that. Isn't our currency in Texas already backed by gold according to our Constitution? And how is transactional gold different than, say, the dollar being backed by gold and silver?
Well, I would love it if the dollar were backed by gold and silver. That was the case when the Federal Reserve Act was passed in 1913, and it was the case when Roosevelt confiscated the gold, which means it was backed by it, but you couldn't take the gold out if you wanted it. He told other countries they could. So France, if they wanted to show up at the Federal Reserve and they said, here's our dollars, we want gold. Actually, at the Treasury window, here's our dollars, we want our gold out. Nixon in 1971 says, oh, I'm sorry, you can't. You can't have it. There's a run on the U.S. bank, and therefore we're closing the gold window. Well, from then on, there was no need for them to back the dollar by gold, and that's how we have $36.321 trillion of debt as I look at usdebtclock.org this minute. So the Federal Reserve just prints money. They just create it digitally. And, that's not me saying that. That was said by Jerome Powell. That was said by Ben Bernanke, two Federal Reserve chairmen. And it was said, and you saw the video by Neil Kashkari. We just print it digitally. Well, is there any end to this? No, there is no end to our ability to do this. And that was on 60 Minutes. They don't back it with anything. So it's very different. It's real money backed. And legitimately, it is gold and silver. It's not even backed by it. It is gold and silver.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's talk about the legislative process. What are the key legal and regulatory hurdles to legalizing transactional gold in Texas?
Well, the number one most important thing is that the Texas Legislature chooses to do it, period. There's court cases, Lane County versus Oregon. And I'll just give you a tiny history on that. In Oregon, in the post-Civil War era, where the federal government was printing greenbacks, that was unbacked paper currency, nothing supporting them, supporting that currency. When they were producing these greenbacks, the state of Oregon legislature decided that they don't want the counties collecting and paying their taxes in unbacked paper money. They thought inflation would hit that and it wouldn't be worth anything a year or two or three down the road. So they insisted that it be paid in gold. Well, Lane County, which is a county inside Oregon, decided, well, we're going to disagree with the legislature here, and we're telling the state of Oregon no, because this paper money, it says good for all debts, public and private, legal tender, just like our paper money today does. And I said, by law, act of Congress, using the supremacy clause, we can pay you in paper money. And the state said no. The legislature said it was gold. Went all the way up to the Supreme Court. It was a case called Lane County versus Oregon, and the court ruled with Oregon. They said, Lane County, if they say gold, you pay gold. Well, can't you interfere? What about the supremacy of federal law? And they said, no. This is an enumerated right of a state in Article 1, Section 10. They have that enumerated right, therefore they can demand gold and silver, and there's no court, there is no Congress, there is no bureaucrat that can overrule that. That's literally in what they said. And they said, and if you don't have gold and silver coins, you can pay in bullion.
Wow. That's pretty strong right there. I mean, it sounds like they supported the Constitution.
Yes, they did. Now, that was 1868.
Well, a little bit's changed since then, Kevin.
It has, but the good news is that has never been overturned. And the other good news is that the current court, led by Clarence Thomas, one of my heroes, I believe would uphold the original intent of the Constitution and not sacrifice for modernism. So they've already overturned the Lemon Law on religious liberty. They've already struck down the Chevron doctrine. They're already chipping away at Wickard v. Philbin. They are now beginning to return the bureaucracy to constitutional authority. And so I think they would do that here too. So now is the time. Glenn Beck said, if you're going to get this passed, do it now while we've got the court that will cement it into eternity.
Yeah, that's excellent. Let's talk about the 89th Texas Legislature that's coming up. Now, I know that in the 88th session, we had a bill for transactional gold that didn't make it out of the session. What about the upcoming session? What bills have been filed? Who filed them? And what does the bill, just give us a snapshot of what the bill says.
Okay, so Mark DeRazio filed the last day bills could be filed. He was a freshman in the last legislature in the 88th. And it was filed on the last day by a freshman. And so we were told, okay, guys, give it up. A lobbyist came to us and said, for the low price of $500,000 in 4 sessions, we can get this passed. And we said, well, we don't have the low price of $500,000, although, to be honest, we've probably spent double that around the country trying to get this done, giving books away and everything else. But for the low price. And we said, we can't do it. And he said, then it will never even get heard in committee. We guarantee it. Freshmen.
Wow.
They were laughing at us. Freshmen. It went to the State Affairs Committee, and State Affairs is where conservative legislation goes to die. And they laughed at us and everything else. And guess what? We got a hearing. Not only did we get a hearing, we got a vote. Not only did we get a vote, we got a bipartisan victory. It went out of State Affairs. Oh, yes, but it's going to calendars. It will never be heard in calendars. It will die there. Well, lo and behold, Mark DeRazio, the freshman, walks into calendars, talks him into it, and Dustin Burrows just pushes it out, and it actually goes out. Now, the problem is its bill number was so high in prioritization that by the time they got to the end of session, it got behind bills that were being chubbed out of existence. It would not have if it had been filed earlier. We'd counted the votes, and we even had the speaker willing to allow it to pass. Now, he wasn't strongly pushing it. He could have pushed it. He could have made it happen. Did not do that. Wouldn't do it for a freshman who called him out, and Mark called him out. But he didn't stop it, and it would have gotten voted on had they not shortened their session to get Ken Paxton impeached. It really was that close. And on the Senate side, it was authored as it will be this session, by Brian Hughes. And Brian Hughes and Tan Parker have both talked to me and said, we support this. Tan said if Brian, and Tan just got elected, it's not majority leader, but it's like majority leader in Texas. Whip, is it whip? I don't know what the official title is, but Tan is a leader in the Senate, and Brian, of course, is a leader in the Senate, has been for several sessions. They sort of friendly fought over it and said, we want to pass it. I want my name on it. Tan says, I will join author. Brian is entering it. And I believe it will go to the State Affairs Committee in the Senate, which we want because Brian chairs that committee. And so Brian, as chairman of State Affairs, can guarantee that it's heard. And he can probably, I can't say guarantee, but he can strongly encourage its passage. We've already talked to the lieutenant governor and his office. We've already talked to enough senators to believe it has a legitimate passage potential. So I think we've got a chance to get it heard and passed in the House. I think Dustin Burrows will allow it to go through, and I think that Cook will encourage it to go through. So I think we've got the House, and we've counted the votes. They exist. Enough people have heard me speak. It made the top 10 priorities. We didn't make top 8, but we made top 10 in San Antonio. It is in the platform like 4 places. I think we've got, and it passed on Prop 7. Prop 7 put on the Republican primary, had 1.6 million Texans voting in favor of it, which was literally 76.5%. So I think we have a good potential for passage. I know where the hiccups and threats are, and we're working on how to minimize those. But we have Republicans and Democrats alike who like this bill because it brings economic justice and it can help Texas, and it even has some revenue potential for the state.
Yeah, and so DeRazio has already filed the bill in the 89th. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, perfect.
In fact, he's filed 2. One of them is amending is not the right word, but one of them is going back to the original bill that created the depository and adding on to it legislation, and the other is a standalone bill. And I don't know which one is going to get passed. Either one would work from my perspective. So in the House, it's filed, and I believe if it's not filed in the Senate, I'd be shocked. But I need to look at that. We're now not just Texas. We're now looking at 30 states, and I'm keeping. I was all morning with Utah, answering questions and concerns and objections, and I did a Utah study bill. We've been working closely with Florida and Georgia and Oklahoma. So I'm not up on the bill numbers like I used to be, but I do trust Mark and I do trust Brian.
Awesome. That's great, man. So you mentioned economic advantages. What are the economic advantages of legalizing gold for transactional use in Texas?
Well, first off, it's optional. And so the advantage is we give people a choice. A choice is a huge advantage in that if you see inflation coming and you want to protect your dollar, you can move into gold and you can still spend it. You don't get stuck with it. We're a perfect example. I had a client in Chicago who passed away, and I helped as executor in her estate. In that process, I had to take 3 rolls of gold coins from her safe and liquidate them and distribute the money to the heirs. Well, it took me like 8 weeks to get them a proper value and then turned into cash. I took them to 3 different locations. They offered me 3 different values. I ended up sending them back to the place where she'd bought them that offered the highest price. And in the process, you had to mail it. In the process, it took about 8 weeks before all the money came out. Well, an average person, let's say you're a single mom and you got 2 kids in school and you get a $1,000 bonus for Christmas and you want to save it, you're going to put it in a savings account or a checking account. You're not going to put it in gold, because how are you going to keep track of that little, like, third of an ounce of gold? Where would I put it and hide it in my house, and what would I do with it? And then when I needed it, let's say the washing machine breaks down or the kid needs new sneakers or frankly a car needs repair or whatever, I can't walk in and pay the dry cleaner with that or the shoe store. So I can't, it's not practical. If it's held with a debit card that you can use, it is practical, so it's convenient. So that's an advantage. And if the state of Texas does this, every time you swipe a debit card or a credit card, there's a fee that the merchant pays for the convenience that you're obtaining. Now, some places they'll say cash price is slightly lower. It's gotten now where a lot of places won't even take cash. They want a card, a tap to pay or whatever. Well, there's a couple of percent being paid every transaction. Well, what if it was a Texas card and the state of Texas owned that, and maybe half of 1% came back to the state of Texas off every transaction? Showed that to Lieutenant Governor, and he said, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could use this to reduce or eliminate property taxes and not just have this as extra spending? So the benefits for the individual are convenience, optionality, and inflation protection. The benefit for the state is not only protecting your citizens, but also the opportunity to make a little bit of money. It could be a net revenue producer.
Yeah, that's great. Now, are there any potential risk or downsides to transactional gold, such as challenges with valuation or fraud?
Yes, but they're certainly less than, it's like the argument about flying after a plane crash. People will tell you, well, I'm not flying anymore, I'm driving. They say, well, it's still statistically, it's the safest way to travel.
Right.
Having the state hold gold and silver, that's a real tangible asset. And if somebody tries to attempt fraud, you have the actual gold. It doesn't go anywhere. And you can unwind the transaction. When you're dealing with ethereal money that does not exist, it's not in that bank vault. You know, I told this story earlier today on another interview. Somebody said, asked me about the banks, and I said, well, look, I had a business that needed millions of dollars investment, and I was trying to get millions of dollars invested, and we jokingly drove past First National Bank of Carmel and said, well, short of robbing a bank, and I said, well, including robbing a bank, we don't have enough money. You break into the bank and you get $50,000. That's all that's in the vault. There's just not that much money there. So the potential for fraud is much greater with ethereal money that doesn't exist. It's just ones and zeros. Here you actually have physical assets. So that lessens it substantially. And it's no more risky to run a debit card transaction on gold than it is on paper money. So in the end, it's a little bit more convenient, and it's a little bit more safe, a little bit safer.
Yeah. You mentioned other states you're working with. Have any other states successfully legalized transactional gold?
Other states have made gold and silver legal tender. Other states have done studies. Utah passed a study bill that I participated in with their state treasurer, Marlo Oaks, as with a vice chair, former vice chairman of the Federal Reserve, a senior vice president from Citigroup, the head of the Utah Bankers Association, a Gold Council member, and we studied this over the summer, and we concluded, yes, it can be done. And so legislation is being drafted right now by my friend Ken Ivory and others in Utah to get this passed in Utah, and they've got a great study behind it. There's a study that Florida passed that they funded $200,000 to study to whether or not this was feasible. The results have not come out yet, but I expect them to be very favorable. So other states have been pursuing this, and they came close, like Texas did, and I think we have a good potential to have one or more states. Texas can still be first If DeRazio and Hughes do their part, Florida's legislative session starts a little bit later. If you get Texas and Florida, you eliminate the other real risk that the federal government tries to stop it. They cannot stop Texas and Florida together, not with Trump in the White House.
It'd be nice if Texas was finally first to something that Florida wasn't first to.
Well, Governor Abbott, if you are listening to this program, this is a chance for you to call up your friend Ron and tell him, Governor DeSantis, Texas has led the way. We were happy to have you come join us. In fact, I did. I've never spoken to Governor Abbott about this, but I did speak to Governor DeSantis. I was at Liberty University. He and I were both speakers. We had a lunch together, and I mentioned this to him, and he said, looked at me in the eye, and he said, if Texas and Florida do this together, no one could stop us. And I believe Governor DeSantis, Governor Abbott, this is your chance to beat him. Be first. Get Texas first. Let's lead the way.
That's awesome, man. I'm with you, Kevin. So, Kevin, how does the push for transactional gold legalization in Texas align with or differ from similar movements that are advocating for cryptocurrency?
Well, the number one, the reasons that they're similar is that we both believe that money should be decentralized away from the Federal Reserve. We believe that money should be limited in production. Bitcoin is limited to 21 million coins ever mined. We both believe that there should be a shared and understood ledger of who has what, where. All of that's true. The main primary difference is Bitcoin's a new innovation, so some people are leery of it, but that's not the main difference. Bitcoin has been adopted some places, and some people love it, some people hate it. But Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution does not say a state can make nothing other than Bitcoin or cryptocurrency legal tender. It doesn't say that. It says gold and silver. So I feel like it's a lot easier to get a state to use its exercised rights that are enumerated than it would be to pass a constitutional amendment. Because if Texas pursues Bitcoin and the federal government chooses to shut it down, there's not much Texas can do to defend that turf, because the Constitution gives the power to coin money and determine the weights and measures and so forth of money other than a state's right to use gold and silver. Other than that, that rests with the Congress. And the Congress has been notorious at allocating that authority to the Federal Reserve or other groups. And so my fear would be that if we went on a purely Bitcoin standard in the state of Texas, the feds would stop, intervene in some way, do something to manipulate or whatever, and they claim it under interstate commerce. The good news, gold and silver are specifically enumerated as a state authority that I do not believe can be taken away by federal law. And I have court cases like Lane County versus Oregon, like Bronson Roads, like Briscoe versus Bank of Kentucky that support my position on this. And by the way, Briscoe versus Bank of Kentucky is not my friend Briscoe Kane, who, if he's listening, had better support this. Briscoe,
that's right.
I knew you win. I knew you before you ran. I supported you when you ran. This Briscoe, I will get your wife on you if you do not.
Yeah, and Briscoe, I have relatives who live in Deer Park, and I told them to vote for you, so you better pony up, buddy.
Exactly.
So let's talk about the value of gold. We know gold doesn't have a fluctuating value as bad as cryptocurrency, but if we legalize transactional gold, do you think the value is going to fluctuate like crypto does, or will it be stable like it has been?
I think it'll be more stable than it has been, because the more that you use it, the market sets the price. And the market price for gold is ultimately the same in 1924 or 25 as it is in 2025. It fluctuates around the price. Really, gains in gold do not come from, oh my gosh, gold is worth more. No, gold is always worth the same. It is money by definition. Biblically, historically, it is money. And yes, it fluctuates because central banks buy and sell it and people treat it like an investment asset. And when they get fearful, they buy it. But if you make it money, it will be the most stable of currencies. And it will rise at the rate of inflation. But it will stay, like I said, you buy a good man suit in 1925 for 1 ounce of gold, $20 bill, or a $20 gold piece. Today, that same suit, 1 ounce of gold will buy you a nice man's suit, $2,700 or $2,650 or whatever it is at the exact moment it is. That'll buy you a really nice suit today. You can go to Neiman Marcus and get a decent suit for that. It is a stable store of value over the long term. It always has been and always will be. And the more it's used transactionally, the lower the volatility will be. It will be less and less volatility, and it'll maintain that purchasing power.
Yeah. So what role does public opinion play in advancing this issue? And are you aware of whether or not Texans are generally supportive of transactional gold?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Public opinion is huge. And in the Republican primary this year, Proposition 7 was put on the ballot by my friend Chris Byrd and his friends. And it said, do you wish that you could use the gold and silver that you have in the Texas Bullion Depository as a transactional currency? It's essentially what it says. Do you want to be able to use it as legal tender? And 76.5% of Texans voted in favor of that, 1.6 million Texans. So when I went to Louisiana and they're talking to me, they said, well, how do we even know people would like this? And my answer to them is, well, we got 1.6 million votes for that. How would 1.6 million votes do in Louisiana? You think you could get a governor elected or somebody? That would win any statewide office. It would win any statewide office in almost any state. That's how powerful it is. In Oklahoma, that's more than half the population of Oklahoma. So when I dropped that little bomb in the Oklahoma Senate, it was like, we don't think it's popular. Well, 1.6 million people think it's popular, 76.5%, and that was without any advertising. Now, Chris called me, actually, Chris and Mark DeRazio both called me, and they said, hey, come up with a budget so we can advertise this. We got to get this proposition out there. So I called my friend Joanne Fleming and said, Joanne, do you think we should advertise this? And she said, oh, heavens no. That's going to pass with flying colors. People want this so bad, it's going to just fly through. But if we'd advertised it, Chris and Mark are right. We probably would have gotten 95% because a few of those people who voted against it didn't understand some of the things. They didn't understand it was optional. They didn't understand how it would work and so forth. And when they learned about that, they said, gee, I voted against it. I wished I'd voted for it. So Joanne was right. We didn't have to spend money. But Chris and Mark were right, too, in that once it's explained, it's extremely popular. I'm telling you, I'm probably Glenn's best salesperson because even though I don't own any of it, not advocating for it, there are others that do the same thing. When I show them how it works on the app, people do just like you did. They go and download it, they get their debit card, and they start testing it and see if it really works. It's enormously popular. And not just Republicans. Name the most liberal Democrat in the Senate.
In the Senate or the House? I know the one in the
Senate.
House. Oh gosh. The U.S. Senate.
We will not say her name, or we will not say her name.
Okay, I know what you're talking about. I was thinking Texas Senate. I'm sorry.
No, in the Texas Senate, exactly. In the Texas Senate, we will not say his or her name. Liberal senator, most liberal. There's no way you'll get anywhere. My colleague Mike Carter was walking Austin, and one of the aides to this particular senator who will remain nameless said, "Can you come in and talk in our office about it?" And it's like, well, it's kind of a waste of time because you're not in the majority here, but sure, I'd be happy to. Walked in, great reception. We love it. Actually, Democrats understand the economic justice aspect of it. And they say, you know what? We believe in fairness. Representative Raymond may be the most conservative Democrat in the House, but he signed on instantly. He's like, I like this. I want to be a joint author. He said to Representative DeRazio, I want to be a joint author. I like this. I want this out of, and I want this passed because I love gold and silver and I love economic justice. Really good guy. I mean, super good guy. And I think we'll win Republicans. I think we'll win Democrats. I think we'll win all of the people's hearts when they see this. If I can get them to read the book, I win them. If you want to argue with me and debate me, I challenge anyone. Promise me that you'll read the book, which means it takes 4 hours. Sit down 4 hours. I know it takes 4 hours because I read the audio. Read the book in 4 hours, and then I'll debate you anywhere, anytime on that subject.
Yeah.
And everybody comes back and says, no, I read it. I really agree with you. I like it. We should do this.
Yeah, I love your book. It's like a treasure hunt. It just connects all the breadcrumbs. So let's talk about advocacy, because we're going into the 89th session and we got grassroots people coming to the Capitol. Actually, tomorrow, January 14th, we've got over 1,000 people headed to the Capitol. And I know a lot of us grassroots are in support of this legislation. So what can we, the advocates for this measure, what can we do to increase awareness and support this legislation?
Well, I mentioned Joanne Fleming earlier, and she's one of my personal favorite heroes. She is, I call her the godmother of conservative Texas politics. I love to watch when she brings all of these powerful leaders in together, and they stop and listen to every word she utters. Whether it's Cindy Castillo, who's a dear friend at Texas Eagle Forum, or whether it is True Texas or Texas Public Policy Foundation, it doesn't matter. They all love what Joanne says, and she has had us before her group multiple times, and we're winning those grassroots groups over. They're advocates, and they show up. We were there on Transgender Bill Day. I don't know if you were there, Brandon.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was everybody, boys wearing girls' dresses and girls wearing boys' clothes. And it really strange day, because they were fighting that. And we would walk into the offices, Republican or Democrat. The Democrat offices all had a sign that says, "This office is a safe space."
Yeah.
Right? And so my wife walked with me, and she'd walk in and she said, "I'm so glad this is a safe space. I like safe." And they just smiled and everything, and we won them over. All it does is take explaining it. If you could get books, if you could take books and get them to the legislators to read. Mark DeRazio was handing out books on the floor. And if you could get people to read the book, we will win them over, because if you're a true Texan, you want to see Texas exercising its rights. It's not going to cost the state money. The bankers tried to put some fiscal note on there that was ridiculous. Now, that's the one challenge we have, is the bankers' lobbies. They said they were neutral in the last session. Well, we're a little cautious. We don't know what this is going to do, and we don't want to, the reality of it, it'll be good for banks. And banks need to get over it. The people want it. And, they make the same kind of argument. Well, what if everybody takes their money out of U.S. dollars and puts it in gold and silver? I'm like, oh, what if everybody takes their kids out of public school and puts them in private schools because they're better? I was like, yeah, that's an argument called an inferiority argument. And you have to protect me. I'm inferior, and therefore you must protect me. It's a stupid argument. It's not going to win in Texas. Texans don't believe in inferiority. We believe in the best. We believe in being number one. So Texas is not going to fall for that inferiority argument. Instead, bankers, if you're watching this and you're a banker, come talk to me. We'll find a way to help you make money, protect and serve your customers, and survive the next financial crisis that might happen. I mean, when Silicon Valley Bank went down, what happened? The bankers, local bankers, were all fearful because people were closing their accounts and sending it to the big five that are not Texas. Bank of America is not Texas. Chase, not Texas. Citigroup, not Texas. So instead, work with us and have people have deposits. Maybe you make home loans in gold where you don't have to worry about inflation. So you could offer lower interest rates, which means your customer would be happier. Everybody wins from sound money. So bankers, come talk to me. That's who would be potential opposition. They're wrong. I will prove them that they're wrong. The people want that. I've talked to experts. We've done surveys. This is very popular, and we can win it. When you go walk the halls of Austin, you carry legislation, carry in a bag of chocolate coins. Party City, before they go out of business because the economy stinks, thank you, Joe Biden, Party City is going out of business. Go buy a bag of chocolate coins or order some extra Hanukkah gelt. Hanukkah is just over. Get some bags of gelt and carry those around, and they'll know who you are. Walk in, hand them a book, hand them a bag of chocolate coins, which are both below the threshold of gifts. It's like taking chocolate chip cookies in or something, and books are just research material, and say, hey, I want you to study this and do this for me. We will win them over. I expect that Mark DeRazio and Brian Hughes and Dan Patrick and the Speaker Cook or Burrows and the governor are all going to be crowing on Fox News. Now, let me tell you one other thing, why they need to do it now. Matt Gaetz, everybody knows who Matt Gaetz is. Congressman, he resigned. He's an open seat in the panhandle of Florida, the safest Republican district in Florida. That seat, Donald Trump has endorsed the chief financial officer for the state of Florida. His name is Jimmy Patronis, and Jimmy is running for that congressional seat. He's interviewed on Fox and Friends on Saturday morning. I'm watching it, and I'm watching him talk about Fox and Friends, and said, hey, it looks like you're trying to make gold and silver transactional in Florida. Talk about that. And it went into the extended hours on Fox Nation. I'm telling you, he is an incredible advocate for transactional gold and silver. How did he learn what he learned? He read the book Pirate Money. And when he read it, he got jazzed about it, said we should do this. We have a great legislative team and effort in Florida to make this happen. So, Texas, this is your chance. Jimmy Patronis, Trump's handpicked guy, is going to see this enacted in Florida before he jumps to the United States Congress, and he will. So this is your chance, Texas. This is a national movement. You can lead on this. Don't be a follower. Don't be a left behind. Don't listen to the naysayers, and don't buy the false arguments of the bankers. We've got some good bankers, some great Texas local bankers who understand this, read the book, and are on our side. But don't listen to that Bankers Association if they say no. If they say yes, I 100% agree with them.
That's awesome. So, Kevin, how do people get your book, and how do we get this book into the hands of our 89th legislators?
Okay, so you can get the book at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or any on Goodreads, anything online. Or you can go to piratemoneybook.com, piratemoneybook.com, and you can buy copies in bulk. Instead of $17.87 a copy, which is 1787 is the year the Constitution was written and presented. My previous book was 1776, called According to Plan. We charge 1776. We will sell you 10 copies for $100. And if you have problems with that, we have a pay it forward program where some people have donated extra money so that they can help us get more books out. So go to piratemoneybook.com and order there, or contact Brandon directly and say, look, I want to give out some books and I need some of that pay it forward. We don't have a ton of it. We've used up I've probably given 5,000 books away, half at our expense and half at the expense of donors at least. But if you want, and by donors, I mean they buy the books and leave them with us to deliver. But if you want copies of the book, we will do everything we can to help you. And here's why it's important that you get a copy. You say, well, my legislator already has a copy. Are they voting for it? Have they told you they're voting for it? If they don't tell you they're voting for it, give them another copy, because this is what a legislator does when he gets a copy. It's like, oh, thank you so much. That's so kind of you to bring me a book, and puts it on the shelf. When the second copy comes into the legislator, oh, thank you so much, knowing there's one back there. As soon as you leave the office, he says to his assistant, see who needs a book, give him that book, donate it to the library, put it on eBay, I don't care. When the third copy comes in, it's like, why do people keep giving this? When the 10th copy comes in, I think I'd better read it. And I know that's true because the treasurer of the state of West Virginia called me one day and said, who in the world are you? I don't ever remember. I've been in West Virginia once in my life as a kid. I haven't as an adult been in West Virginia. I was like, well, Mr. Treasurer, I don't know. He said, well, people keep giving me your book. I said, how many copies you got? And he said, I've got 10 copies. People keep sending them in. No, 11. There's another one that just came in today. Riley Moore was his name as treasurer. Why do I need to read the book? And I said, you need to read the book because you can make transactional gold and silver available to the people of West Virginia. You know what? He read the book. 10 copies will do it. I can't tell you how many copies Dan Patrick has been given, but he needs another one. Every one listening to this needs to carry to the lieutenant governor's office a spare copy and hand it to him. And if we have to make copies available for you to do that, you sign them in the front, so it's harder to sell on eBay and harder to give away. Not that the lieutenant governor is doing that, but I would love his library to have, his book and 50 copies of my book. That's how you get something passed. And by the way, here's how you keep it. How you keep it is very simple. Once this is passed, you call up your favorite legislator and you say, all right, I want to pay you in gold my next contribution to your campaign. Will you take gold? And they'll have to set up an account to receive the gold. And once they get the gold, they will never vote against this. They will, and every donation from then on you make in gold or silver, which costs the same in US dollars at the time, but if it's sitting in their account, it'll retain its purchasing power. So they'll win and you'll win, and they'll never forget you because you donated in gold. That's how Bitcoin worked. They started donating to congressmen in Bitcoin. And that's what we need to do. We need to make transactional gold and silver so permanent that it can never be taken away.
Yeah, that's brilliant, man. I love that idea. And I think there's some people listening that are going to actually do that very thing. So, Kevin, we've got thousands of people tomorrow going to the Capitol. We've got 14 bus lines scheduled across the state of Texas, not counting people going down on their own. It's a big day for selecting the Texas speaker. And I know we're going to be talking to our lawmakers about not just banning Democrat chairs, but we're going to be talking about the RPT legislative priorities. Like you said, transactional gold made the top 10 at the convention. So give our viewers just two big talking points. Just real quick, elevator speech, 30 seconds. I got to talk to this lawmaker about why we need to do gold. I'm going to give them a copy of your book. But what do I say real quick to a lawmaker?
It's a constitutional right Texas should use on behalf of its citizens. It protects the citizens against inflation, and the state can make some money from it.
Beautiful. Easy peasy, right?
Easy peasy. And there's a whole lot of other reasons beyond that. But you got to be careful when you say the other reasons, like stopping central bank digital currency. Some of our Democrat colleagues don't see that as a risk or a problem. Some people took the vaccine. Some people didn't take the vaccine. But everybody got hit by inflation. And everybody understands a state should stand up for its rights. And everybody understands that if a state can make money and reduce property taxes, that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Kevin, it's been an honor to have you on the show tonight. And I'm going to throw my website up there, which is danielnation.com. If you click onto bus trips, you will see the bus trip tomorrow. It's not too late to go. You can go on your own, or some of our buses, they still have seats available. You can buy tickets tonight, literally. And on my website is a link to the bus schedule. If you click on that bus schedule link, you'll find all the sign-up links. The buses are sorted by county, so just find your county, the nearest county to where you live and where that bus is going to pick up. Some buses are making multiple pickup locations, so you can get on at different locations. But show up tomorrow. We need to make our voice heard in the 89th session, and we need to come back. We're going to make a splash on the first day, but it's the squeaky wheel that always gets the grease in Austin. We learned that in the 88th session. And so gold, I believe, is going to pass this year, but we've got to advocate for it on a consistent basis. We got to go more than one time. We've got to keep it in front of our lawmakers, make sure we testify in committee hearing on it, make sure that we lobby to get it out of calendars onto the floor for a vote. And Kevin, what is your involvement going to be? Are we going to see you at the Capitol this year?
Yeah, I wish I could be there for the opening. I had planned on it, but I got invited by the Silicon Valley Leadership Forum. It is a handful of conservative Silicon Valley tech leaders. And they said, can you come to California and help us understand how do we solve this problem? And there's some key parties there tied to the Trump administration and Doge and other things that I definitely want to have that opportunity to speak to them. So I apologize, but I will absolutely be in Austin. I was there, as you know, Brandon, every day of the Republican convention. And I was in Austin in the last session multiple times before and after session. And I will go and testify and do whatever. I showed up for every hearing and everything to support. We walked the halls and we will be there again. And I was told this by Senator Bob Hall's legislative assistant, who said I was the first Blaze TV host to ever come to support legislation. That wasn't the first time I'd been there. I've been there for EMP bills. I've been there for pro-life bills. I've been there for a whole election integrity bills. I've been there for a whole lot of things. But they said I was the first and only Blaze television host that has ever come to Austin to support legislation and to support legislators. So I promise I will see this through in Texas. My whole family, my team. I took my whole family pretty much to the Texas convention. We rented out a Airbnb and we took bus loads to the convention center in San Antonio. Not literal bus loads. My car got towed and a whole bunch of other things. But we're there. We're here for Texas. We moved to Texas 20 some years ago from California, and we're here to stay in Texas. We love Texas.
You're the California refugees that we love. Hey, Kevin, how can people find out more about your show on Blaze TV or you? I put up your website, but how can people find out more about your show?
Yeah, let me tell you that. But before I do, I want to tell you, I actually never gave up my Texas residency when I lived in California. I voted in Texas. I paid my taxes through Texas. I paid, everything I did as Texas. I paid extra to be a Texan in California. They charged me extra, but I did that. You can learn more at economicwarroom.com. That's our main website. If you want to learn about our legislative advances on 30 states, it's transactionalgoal.com. And I am on every major social media at Economic War Room is the main handle for X or Facebook or Truth Social and things like that. So I appreciate you following me. We'll do everything we can to make Texas even greater.
Awesome. Hey, Kevin, it was an honor to have you on the Daniel Report tonight. Thanks for coming on, and I will see you in Austin this year, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it, Brandon.
All right. Take care.